Hi, this is JColuciello, and today we're going to spend a few moments talking about post-war prosperity and the Great Depression. As the war came to a close, America was still in the midst of its second industrial revolution. As a result of this, there was a significant increase in prosperity. Production had been more efficient and technology was getting better. Machines were improving and we were able to produce more in a faster and more efficient method. A couple things really contributed to this. One significant contribution is the development of electricity. This changed America and the world, basically. By electricity becoming available and replacing steam as the main power source, factories were able to produce more, faster, better, and with less oversight, with less effort, with less employees, and so forth. It's interesting to point out that in 1914, only about 30% of the factories were powered by electricity, which is compared to about 1929, almost 70% were now powered by electricity. So this was a huge factor that definitely changed the way the workforce was and manufacturing was performed. As a result of some of these things, wages experienced a steady climb. They were producing more. Companies were making more. Because they were making more faster and more efficiently, the average hours that an employee needed to work throughout the week decreased in length, simply because they were able to accomplish the same thing faster. As this started to continue to grow and they could make more goods in a faster and more efficient manner, they started to look at creating an environment in which people wanted to buy their product. And this is where we see the consumer good industry really start to take off. Time and effort was spent in research and in reviewing advertising and coming up with different advertising methods as well to reach out to the general public. This research and advertising effort actually translated into increased sales, which translated into more production and more money. As a result of this, you can see that companies learn to really manage themselves a little bit better, looking at each part of their workflow to see where they could maximize production and efficiency and really see that return on investment, whether it was investment in money spent on man hours and employees versus improvements in technological components or the size of the factory itself. As this starts to continue and this really starts to take off from a consumer good industry perspective, this is where we start to see modern corporation type of businesses explode. At this point, instead of it being a single family owned company and they kind of just did everything, we start to see a separation out from the owners of the company and the day-to-day operational managers of the company. There starts to be that separation. This created a whole nother level of subject matter experts within the company, and these managers really were operational efficiency people. They looked at what they could do better, faster, smarter, with less overhead. They also looked to grow the company. Many people did this by diversifying their products and expanding into different markets. They also looked at exploiting international markets and some of those areas. They started to think about behavioral psychology as it applies to personnel management and keep some of those things in mind. This is really where we see the oligopoly become the norm for each industry, where there's just a few major companies that are handling everything within a specific industry, and they were national, very much so. General Electric is a good example of that, and we'll get into the vehicles in a second, but GE is a really good example of that. They started to diversify and grow until they were an international company. At this point, because the operational managers were starting to think about behavioral psychology as it related to employee management, they start to look on a focus of more on the employee needs. What makes us more enticing as a company, and how can we better take care of our employees? Really starting to look at the employee as an asset and not just a tool. This is where we get welfare capitalism. Managers began to institute and implement plans such as medical programs for health, work safety programs, recreational programs such as reading or sports, and different insurance options. They also started to look at benefits and investments from the company perspective, such as if an employee is invested in the company, they are more likely to perform better. And so they started looking at stock options for employees as well. During this time, we also see the emergence of the automobile. And this, like electricity, was another game changer for America and for the world. This, in and of itself, provided an entire new industry that needed many different manufacturers, many different products to be supported and developed and maintained and so forth. So we've now got people needing to put out glass and so forth. We've got upholstery. We've got, the shape and dimensions that are included in just building the chassis itself. And then we've got all of the different components of the combustion engine. And then you've got the wheels and the tires and the lights. This just changed everything. Not only did it affect the fact that we could now go farther faster, this made it easier for people to get to work. They didn't have to be able to walk to the office, to wherever they were employed. So we see the emergence of an urban and a suburban area because we could now drive to work each day. We also see an increase in everyday leisure, and the more likelihood of people going away somewhere outside of what they see in their everyday life, because now with a vehicle, it is easier to travel farther and explore. This also created new parts of industries because now you've got to have people along the way to wherever people are going that can maintain vehicles, that can support that. You also need roadside attractions such as food. You need housing and places to stay overnight. You also need destinations, because you want to capture those people that are now traveling because they have a vehicle. This completely changed everything. While this is happening, though, as companies are getting larger and larger and larger, and while, yes, the employees were being more taken care of, there were some other issues because most of the money was, in fact, going to the owners of the company. And this created a key situation that leads right into the Great Depression. There was such an uneven gain in the prosperity after the war, with a huge concentration of the wealth in a small amount of the population. This creates a situation that just is unsustainable. And as that bubble starts to burst, we have problems. One thing that comes to mind is the bull market in here. So stocks were being purchased on a basis of their potential earnings, what they would likely be able to make as that bubble increased and prices continue to climb. Eventually, though, that hits a point where it's just not sustainable. And then all of a sudden, those stocks become sold only at resale value. And so as those prices peaked in the September of 1929, they hit a peak. They no longer, could sustain that level of cost, and the prices start to decrease. They decreased so significantly that by October 28th of 1929, the Dow Jones had actually lost 13%. This creates a huge panic. And the following day on October 29th, over 16 million shares of stocks were sold. So everyone is panicking, trying to pull out of the market. There is just not the money there. And there are several consequences that occur at this point. As that market collapses, the credit foundation just crumbled because it was based on things that were not actual, true and real money. Loans that had been given out to companies or to people based on stock as collateral, when they lost the stock, the loans were called. This caused around $30 billion to be wiped out instantaneously. This then, because nobody has the extra money and everybody's lost almost everything, spending drops through the floor, which causes manufacturers to cut production because they are not selling. And if they're not producing, they don't need the staff. And so many jobs are lost across all industries. This unemployment causes further decrease in spending, and we now are in a spiral effect. As the banking funds were tied to these potential financial gains, many banks failed because clients were panicking about their money, went to actually withdraw their funds, and then the bank would close because they just don't have the money to cover those accounts because they've lost that all as well under the stock market because those funds had been given in loans to other people based on collateral for stocks that they no longer have and cannot repay. As those banks closed, we have again a further loss of jobs. We have savings wiped out for millions, and we're left with mass unemployment. There's no money in the economy, and this just creates significant issues. There was a significant uptick in substance abuse, specifically with alcohol. There's a psychological component of loss of the prestige in place, especially for men, which at the time were the primary breadwinners, that they could no longer take care of their family. There was an increase in suicide throughout the country. And this actually, as many people think this was just the American Great Depression, this actually created a depression across the world because it did have an international impact. The economies are tied together. And for instance, America had loaned money to Germany, and then Germany, for an item, and that Germany had used that loan to pay back loans to the British and the French. And the British and French were using the loans from Germany to pay back to America. And then America was using that money to pay back, Germany and so forth. And there's a domino effect. So when America's economy crashed, this created a worldwide domino effect. It's very interesting to understand as we go through life, even now, and somebody passes away or we see an elderly person with certain behaviors, we can see what we call they lived through the Great Depression. And what they lived through during that time, even if they were 3, made a significant impact psychologically and emotionally that a lot of people never really got over. They never really used to start to trust banks and so forth. For instance, my father-in-law, as you probably remember, passed away this summer, and he was 92. He lived through the Great Depression. He was young at the time, but he lived through the Great Depression. And as we've been going through his house and his estate, we very quickly realized that we have to look through absolutely every little item, because we went to give some books to the library, donate them to the local library. And they called me within a couple days and said, you need to come in here. You need to come in here. We found something we need to give you. And while they were just double checking the pages in the books to put things in, they found $100 bills stuck in multiple places throughout the books. So we had donated around 73 books, and they found about $45,000 just stuck in the book pages. Since then, we've started looking everywhere, and as we're cleaning things out, we have found money in toasters. We have found money in shoe boxes. We have found money rolled up and stuffed in old shoes. We have found money between the mattresses. We have found money between blankets that have been folded up between the layers. And so it's interesting. The Great Depression, while to many of us now may seem just a historical oddity, it still has significant impact. It's interesting, as we've been going through, I have found reams and reams of folded used tinfoil and folded used bread bags and all of these little things that we take for granted. But it definitely brings you back to understand exactly more, at least, of what they went through and how this had a lasting, permanent effect on many Americans. Thank you.